Hey everyone, welcome back to our fabulous Me First Turtle Talk series. We have the amazing Jonah Aline Daniel today with us, and one of our, again, OTs. I've been calling them OTs, or original turtles. So the first group that walked into Turtle Tank and took a big risk with us, and you know, hopefully paid off. I think it did, which is why they're still here. So I'm gonna introduce the series first, and I'm come back right back to Jonah. So this is the Me First series. Me First is about centering ourselves and coming from a full place to be able to create worlds of radical love and freedom from that place rather than from a depleted place. And we have an entire series going on. If you go to www.turtletank.co/me first, you can find out more about Turtle Tank. We're an incubator for radical love and freedom. The radical entrepreneurship space that we run is one of the programs that we're running right now. And the Me First campaign is just really highlighting the approach and the framework that we use in a kind of a overarching way. We're going to talk a little bit more about the details of how that works. But again, I want you to join us for the rest of our talks this week. We have one more speaker. You can watch the previous talks online. They're available on YouTube. They're available on Facebook. They're available on that page. So this is the soul child, I call it, of EJ here, who's the co-creator of Turtle Tank, and I'm Samia, the other co-creator. EJ had enough of, sacrificing herself for the sake of, love and freedom. And we just want to come from love and freedom rather than just work for love and freedom. And this was really her baby. So thank you again, EJ, for this. I thank you every time, but you deserve it. And Jonah. So now I'm going to shift over to Jonah, our amazing, wonderful Jonah. I call them super Jonah. And you'll know why. Jonah is the boss of going slow to go fast, and has just been really one of the most impressive practitioners of the Turtle Tank framework. I don't even know how to put it, but they really take something and apply it in a way that's astounding and specific and quick and transforms very, very quickly. And so there's something about, and then they come to me, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, no, you know everything that you're doing. You're doing wonderful, So there's something about Jonah that's always been really, really special to me with regards to this, just being able to apply something so deeply and understand something so deeply and transform, at the fastest pace possible. And they're going, I think I'm moving slowly. I'm like, no, you're actually moving really fast. And so move slow to move fast. Big fan of yours, Jonah, and how you work. We've learned a lot from you also over the last couple of years. And you're definitely in our core OT group. So we're just honored and humbled to have you. Brilliant mind, amazing organizer. And, I'm going to just introduce you formally now, read your bio, but I want to say something about you. Always enjoy our sessions together and the transformation, witnessing you transform. Mm-hmm. So, there's, if you're like the number one transforming force that I've witnessed in this space. So thank you so much for that. All right, I'm going to read your bio really quickly here. So Jonah is a medicine maker, beekeeper, medicinal herb grower, beeswax ritual candle maker with narrow bridge candles, and clinical herbalist with plants as allies. Jonah lives rurally, southern Pomoland, North Sonoma County in California. They have worked for 15 years as an activist and organizer inside movements against racism and for healing and disability justice and indigenous sovereignty. As a queer and trans disabled Ashkenazi Jew, Jonah is committed to anti-Zionism and to supporting the full boycott of Israeli goods. They are passionate about the radical potential of rural spaces, the process of decolonization of land, and the protection of endangered and at-risk plant communities. Jonah's spiritual and cultural work includes creating space for ritual with integrity and liberatory potential through ritual candle making, ritual facilitation with narrow bridge candles. Their herbal work seeks to be access-centered, trauma-informed, and a community healing and transformation resource. Through their work, Jonah seeks to create healing ritual offerings, practices, and leadership that grow liberatory, spiritual community, and decolonize relationship to land, lineage, and future. We're going to talk more about Narrow Bridge Candles as well, which is a candle making business in support for the full Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel. That's BDS. You should familiarize yourself with that if you don't know yet. A portion of the profits of Narrow Bridge Candle goes to support movements and organizations working for Palestine, Palestinian self-determination, and US-based struggles for racial justice and indigenous sovereignty. Jonah, thank you so much for your work, your commitment to this work, and your organizing always from every place that you work. So thank you for being here today, Jonah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ooh. Is there an echo?
No, we're good.
All right. So welcome. Yeah, you said exactly what I was going to say. Like, my experience of you, Jonah, is exactly that. We have a session, and then the next time we meet, you've implemented everything that we talked about and then some. You have more questions, and your questions are always really, really brilliant. Like, they always make me think deeper. They always help me get clear about how to like talk about something or something that's missing that I need to add. And so I just appreciate your mind, your heart, and how you bring your full self to like whatever you're doing. So it's been an honor to have you in our community, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be asked and honored to be here.
Yeah. So I was thinking we could start with just the question of like, what brought you to Turtle Tank? Like, why did you say yes? Why did you sign up? And why have you stayed for these 2 years?
I think, well, I already had a sort of accountability buddy practice with and working and mentorship relationship with Aurora Levens Morales. And I heard about Turtle Tank from both of them and sort of came at me from a few different directions. And it was sort of, I should sign up for this. And really came in a lot of ways from a pretty desperate place, from a very, very difficult, very overextended, isolated, kind of working myself into the ground without see that anything was coming of it kind of way. A place that was very, very stressed about finances, not coming anywhere near covering myself, and really having a lot of, I think, shame and difficulty with that as a person living rurally in a pretty socially and politically isolated way. And my main way that I was dealing with all of the shame and anxiety of all of that, and trying to, survive and pay my bills and pay back my loans and all of that, was just by honestly, like, trying harder and harder,
Mm-hmm.
like, obviously I'm not doing enough. If I can't make enough money to pay my bills, obviously I'm not doing enough. So, really to a business, start a new business, maybe a third business, and run a rural household, disabled body, anybody that struggles with chronic pain and illness knows that can be really a full-time job in and of itself, live and be okay. And just trying to buy people and pretty very well.
Yeah, your sound is going a little bit like in and out. I don't know if you're hearing that too, Samia. So I don't know if there are any adjustments you could make, because I don't want people to miss what you're saying.
The only adjustment I can make, switch my internet to my phone hotspot. Does it seem like a mic issue or an internet issue?
Maybe an internet issue.
Any idea?
Yeah.
Okay, give me 1 second, and I think I can improve it.
Okay,
Perfect.
That sounds great. Samia, in the meantime, while Jonah's doing that, do you want to speak to kind of where they were before they joined Turtle Tank? I mean, because that's kind of a familiar story for us in terms of like where people are and feeling like, oh, I'm here because I'm not working hard enough. Let me figure out how to work harder or do more.
Right. Yeah, people often come to us because they're overextended. I mean, that's the, and they're spread thin, doing, a million things, trying a million things, working themselves into the ground. So part of what we worked on with Jonah was the systemization of their work, the focus and the systemization. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about maybe a little bit more. Hey, perfect. That's better.
I'm okay. Better, yeah.
Yeah, we can see you better too. Okay. So, good. So, Jonah, we were just saying that, a lot of people come to us because they're overextended, and they're spread thin. And we're trying to keep up with all of the, keep all the balls up in the air. We want to, be good organizers and good practitioners and good people and, also run our businesses effectively. And usually we've been trying things in making sure that we're doing things the right way, but not being able to be financially sustainable because we've underpriced our products and we've, we don't have sustainable financial models because we're struggling with capitalism. We're trying to understand how to, sell our stuff. And so anyway, it's a pretty common way in which people find, placing people where people are when they find us, I guess. And so that's all I was saying while you were gone. So I wanted to, give EJ the floor again. But yeah.
Yeah, just a follow-up question to what you were sharing, Jonah. So you said yes, because you were coming with all those things. What's had you stay in Turtle Tank for these 2 years?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that's had me stay is seeing such incredible transformation in my business and in my life. And I did do some reflection and a little bit of writing and talking and thinking about that in preparation for the interview. What I've said most often when people have asked about it, especially when they've said, oh, but I couldn't possibly afford, what this costs. I've said, yeah, when I signed up for this, there was no way. I felt like there's no way I can afford this. And at this point, I feel like there's no way I can afford not to do it. And the other thing, and I don't quite know where this comes from, but at some point in my coaching or my somatic training or my variety of therapeutic practices, there's a concept about taking on more challenge, like maybe it's very obvious, but just the more challenge taken, the more support needed. And my business has become way, way more complex in the past 2 years, way more successful in a variety of ways, but also just requiring a tremendous amount more of me. And so there's ways I feel like I really started just from a pretty kind of lost, desperate place and have really grown in a place, started in my very, very busy season where my ability to sit in front of the computer and watch something and write in a worksheet or, pretty limited. But came with, worked on it over time, but came with some just confidence that what I was able to do and get out of it was the right amount, and really grown into it and continued to sort of trust, okay, there's a million things happening. I'm not doing them all, but I'm finding the ones that are right for me. And, figuring out I need support with this thing. Where can I find that? How can I find that? And assuming that it's there, whether it's other people that came in with me in the first year, whether it's people in the cohorts, in the specific smaller groups, or in a one-on-one coaching, or just asking the group on Facebook who's dealt with this, or just finding a variety of pathways to sort of get needs met around what's going on.
That's great.
I love it.
Did you want to say anything about that, Sonia?
Yeah, I think Jonah, the transformation that I witnessed with you is, so drastic, you know, because it's like you went and you talked about this briefly in one of our recent classes where, you know, you're in the flow now. You know, you're in the flow of your work and your life in a totally different way than you were when you first walked in. And like you said, you're able to deal with higher and higher levels of complexity because of the support systems that you've put in place. And that's one thing that I love about you too, is you understand that so deeply, and you're accessing all these different support systems, you know, within Turtle Tank and outside of Turtle Tank, you know, and that's really required to do this work. You know, and as you said, the more the challenge, the more the impact we want, the more support we need. And we're not just talking about team members, we're talking about ourselves, you know, having the support systems for ourselves to be able to hold, you know, that kind of complexity and that kind of challenge, because the more impact we want, the more challenging things are, you know. And so it is a capacity thing as well. And I just love how you've you know, found this rhythm with your work. And I think it's going to just get better from here, you know, as you go along. And so this is Jonah at the 2-year mark. You know, I can't wait to see Jonah 2 years from now, you know, at the 4-year mark. We call that kind of the integrate wisdomized phase, where you transitioned and transformed fully into this next level of your work, you know. So I'm just super, super excited for that. And I think that, you know, the financial stability and the team stability and all of that just follows what you talked about. This, you know, when we're supported and we're full, we draw in people that are supportive. We draw in people that, you know, meet us where we are too, not in our, you know, in our wholeness, you know. And so we also draw in the kind of stakeholders and clients and communities and whatever that are also in their wholeness and are interested in our work. So there's kind of like a ripple effect that happens with us being full and whole. And so I think it's, you know, that's core here. I think, you know, this is something you and I talked about a little bit. EJ, I want to go back to you and your questions.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to take a step back and maybe take people on that journey of how you've been able to move through those transformations. And so could you talk about how your work with Turtle Tank has helped you start practicing Me First more, like really prioritizing your vision, prioritizing your wellness, prioritizing your desires, and bringing that at the center of how you're living your life and doing your work?
Yeah. So my understanding of the Me First framework in its most basic sense is about being able to prioritize my health and well-being and really take responsibility for my work. My personal work, I guess, and do the work. And I would say just even starting from signing up felt like an investment in myself, in my development, in my business, and really kind of a leap of faith, you know, at a moment when I was borrowing more and more money every year just to like live where I live and pay my grocery bills. To sign up to pay a monthly amount, felt like a significant sort of leap of faith just to begin with, to invest in myself in that way.
Yeah.
And really the start of the work for me was or maybe not the start of the work, but the start of the sort of me first work, and the things that sort of were the biggest transformations at the beginning was the energy drain work. And just really, you know, starting it, getting stuck, getting overwhelmed, deciding to do it with M. Kalyashiki and us sitting together and doing it, and being really, really unhappy with the answers that I got from the kind of survey assessment of what are your energy drains, and then sort of putting it aside and not being able to interact with it for a while, kind of until I figured out how to deal with those.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of pretty major, pretty intense energy drains that were really, really impacting my emotional, spiritual health and life. I just kind of had nothing left at the end of. And I made started by making some really big changes there. And then they kind of just kept coming and coming.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing, I think this is more about the question too, but they sort of flow into each other about just in general, how has the sort of me first and Turtle Tank impacted my life, changed my life. And the biggest thing that I would say about that is that through the container of Turtle Tank, I have been able to learn to develop the skills and abilities to assess, really in business and in life, to assess timing, capacity, and scale. And all of those things were missing. I'm a person who has a lot of ideas, gets very excited about things, has a lot of initial sort of momentum and motivation to get something started, make some calls, send some text messages, make some emails, draft up a vision of something, try and get 1 million people to do something with me. And then very, very quickly, in the context of somatics, there's like this thing called rhythms of excitement. So I get sort of excited, and then like very, very quickly, my system is just like, no, that's far too alive. And it's just overwhelmed, dread, anxiety. Like I just burned my brain out kind of over and over again. So like try and do 1 million things, don't leave bed for a month. Try and do 1 million things, don't leave bed for a month. Like kind of for my life, honestly. And so really having the tools to begin to assess, okay, what can I actually do in a day and still do another day next day? What can I actually do in a week, in a month, in a year? And those are still new skills for me in a lot of ways, but really essential. And the scale piece, I think, is potentially even the biggest one. And the most impactful story I have about that is one of my very first one-on-one sessions with Samia. And I'm talking about my vision for my life, really, and talking about how I want to live on land, and I want to grow medicinal plants that I make medicine from, and I want to, really just this grand vision of my life. And Samia sort of says, and all the longing and despair and hopelessness, and it's too hard and it's too much, all the things that go along with that at that moment for me. And Samia sort of says, well, but don't you already have that? And it sounds like so silly, but I literally live on land, grow medicinal plants, and make medicine from them, and live in a space and in a way that I can attune to my own nervous system, live it at my own pacing. And the problem was the scale. And getting to the root of what's the desire, sort of the why of all of it. The plants, the medicine, for example, like, why do I want to grow the medicinal plants? I want to grow the medicinal plants because I want and need to be in relationship to medicinal plants as elders, as allies and friends, as community and family. And so what I did was planted terrariums and planted the plants in pots and brought them onto my porch. I changed the scale.
Yeah.
And that would kind of change things. Also, I identified the ways in which all of this striving, trying, and striving for this future thing was really obscuring my ability to see and experience what I already had. And, and I think a lot of that is internalized, like capitalism and ableism and shame and a million other things about, well, if I don't make more money than I spend in a year, then obviously there's something wrong with me. And if I'm not trying really hard every minute to fix that, then that's an even bigger problem. And so then I'm just spinning in all directions simultaneously, trying to figure out how to make enough money to like be okay.
Right.
And that's not a good way to run a business, I've discovered.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. that was a big moment. That was a big day.
I remember that day. Thank you, Jonah, for sharing that.
Yeah, totally.
I would love to, can I say something to that? You know, I love that you pinpointed this, you know, it really all kind of centers around value, you know, and like you said, there's shame around, well, I'm not valuable if I'm not producing, right, at a particular scale or a particular way. And we lose that sense of presence that you talk about, EJ, like being present with what we already have, as you know, really being present with the resources that we have, with the brilliance that we have, our inner resources, our value, our energy, you know, and really understanding those kind of you know, I call them like your DNA stuff, you know, your DNA work that you're already doing, you know. And so that's what I think is often forgotten is, and people, you know, sometimes people talk about it like, oh, be grateful for what you have. Let's reframe that a little bit and say, be honest about what you have, right? And be clear in an objective way. Okay, I have all these really wonderful things that I'm already doing. And the concept of, I think what's unique about Turtle Tank is that, you know, in so many other places, people will teach you how to think, you know, about things. But when it comes to actually practicing it, we're not taught how to do it, to actually do it, right? So we hear a lot of strategy, you know, and strategy is mostly like this mental exercise. It's not a process of doing, you know. And so we reframe this to call strategy strategic being, right? Where we understand I'm sorry, we have a dog. Where we understand that there's a way of doing things that has to follow the strategy, you know, form and function, or, you know, we call it the strategy and the container, the flow, you know, of things. And so this idea of scale is usually where people get stuck, because they take every project and assume they're all functioning at the same level of intensity and development and understanding the difference of where things are. You know, something's at an egg stage or something is at a, you know, mature stage, and what's the relationship I need to have to that. You know, so you understanding, saying, hey, I was like, well, you already have plants and they're at this egg stage, and so what do you need to do there, right? And so there's a strategy for that and a framework for that. And then you have your mature business, what do you need to do there? And so instead of being overwhelmed with all these things that we have, you know, 50,000 things, now we're starting to look at them as these separate parts and untangling this big web, you know, into clear parts, and then being able to say, okay, for this thing, we're going to do this, for this thing, we're going to do this, for this thing. And that's really what strategic being is all about, is being able to kind of untangle and address things where they are. And the piece that I love is the desire piece, you know, this being, again, rerouting in desire with every project and being able to scale from that place, right? And or understand scale from that place, you know. So what are you already doing, and valuing that so deeply that it feeds and ignites the growth almost naturally, rather than like pushing it and forcing it and all of that stuff. So if we root back into it and say, okay, what's so precious about this? Oh my God, I'm so in love with it. It's like presence in a relationship, right? You know, you become more present with the person. All of a sudden they unfold into, like, the relationship unfolds into this much deeper level. You find this person that you've never seen before, right? And this part of this person that you've never seen before. So it's very much the same with this, with, you know, rather than like maybe even, I don't know, you know, there's depth that we can get to with each project, right? That allows us to kind of unfold from that place. And it's almost like when you see it for what it is, and when you see the value of it and the work that you're doing as valuable, all of a sudden it kind of grows on its own. And there's something about that with you, Jonah, that, you've been able to see that and witness that, and the magic of that, of like rooting in like, whoa, look at what I am doing. And all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. You're just like, oh my God, I'm doing all the, this is, and all of a sudden it starts to kind of, catapult itself, So I don't know, EJ, if you want to say something to that. I think it's, and then just being witnessed, I think you have some, there's a psychological framework that I know you reference sometimes, the recognizing what we've done, and from that place that's what actually helps us, move forward. I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's just about realizing how, like, when we're moving through growth periods, there's a shedding, like a letting go of the patterns that aren't serving us anymore, whether these are mental patterns of like beliefs, or whether they're just like, somatic patterns that we're realizing like, okay, this isn't working. I need to shift this behavior. And like in making those shifts on a somatic level, like what helps it is like you're creating new neural pathways. And so when you take the time to actually celebrate and acknowledge like, oh, I wanted to break this pattern and I did, or I wanted to break this pattern and I was aware of, I'm more aware of when I'm getting stuck in that pattern. Oh, now I'm not only aware, but I'm aware, and then I'm making a different choice. And the more you celebrate each of those steps in the process of transformation, then the stronger the neural pathways get laid out. So the research has shown, like when you celebrate and that dopamine gets released, part of what it does is it also reinforces those pathways, and it makes it more likely for you to be like, ooh, I want to be aware again. I want to notice that again. I want to make that different choice again. And then it just makes the pattern shedding and rebuilding a lot easier and smoother.
Yeah.
So it seems like a little thing, like just because it's an acknowledgement. A lot of times when people think of celebration, they think of like, I need to throw a big party, or I need to let everyone know, or I need to spend X amount of dollars to buy myself a present. And it's really just like an acknowledgement and like something like to connect with the pleasure of like, oh, wow, I did that, And it's really subtle, but it makes such a huge difference on a physical level.
Right. And I wrote that in with presence. Go ahead, Jonah.
I was just going to tell you that, or remind you that what I did was buy a bell. Yeah. And I have a bell that I ring. I have one in my house too that's more of a personal accomplishment bell, but I have a bell that's in my workshop that I ring when we complete anything. And anyone that comes to work on anything with me here gets to ring the bell when they complete. And I, every time I invite someone to do it, I have a little bit of like, ugh, people think I'm ridiculous. And then every single person, there's literally not a single time that someone's been invited to ring the bell that they have not seemed absolutely just filled with joy and pleasure to celebrate their accomplishment, however small. And it's become kind of a big deal. It's become a significant part of the culture of the space, which is a very cool thing to share with people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you have one in your workspace and you have one at home for your stuff. Like yes, that's amazing.
Very fun.
I love it. Y'all should hear EJ's abundance party.
I make up songs and dance.
But I love that. I love, again, that it goes back to this, the piece around value. And you were talking, we were talking about disability and shame and the body and all of that stuff. So, the more we value the little things that we're doing, the more present we are with them, right? And the more likely they are to love us back, and to right. And so there's something about this kind of mutual love and presence that happens when we get clear about the value of what we're doing. And the system that we live in wants us to devalue everything we're doing so that we can keep doing more and more and more and like drive ourselves into the ground, right? And so that's really how it's built. But when we start to value things, they become sacred. And the moment, and then they grow from that place, kind of organically rather than by force, and yeah, go ahead, Jonah.
Well, the other things I wanted to say related to this, the first is that with the letting go of the really the striving and the pushing and the trying, releasing that is what actually, for me, is what makes space to listen and to be guided by unseen forces. And that stuff really can't come in with all of that effort in.
Right.
Yeah. And then I was going to say something else about what you were just saying, but I lost it. Oh, the sacredness. Oh, yeah. So I think that, I'm making ritual candles with a very intentional, really spiritual and political, inside of a very intentional spiritual and political frame.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think forgetting, and so having, I would say in the like 2 years ago, maybe having sort of a vague idea, like, yes, this is spiritual work. But not understanding that means I'm folding paper. It's spiritual work. I'm touching materials. It's spiritual work. That the work is actually alive. It's not inanimate.
Yes.
It's not just sort of materials that I push around. It's a part of my sphere and my like almost magical realm. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. And that's what you were saying about the sacredness of it. The thing that made me think of that is you saying the way that it loves you back. You love it and you value it and it loves you back. And feels really powerful to me.
Mm-hmm.
That is I haven't heard or I haven't remembered hearing you saying it quite like that before. And that to me, I'm just like thinking of these ritual, these raw materials and these finished materials kind of loving me back, but also loving back all the people who I send them to.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of connected to the next piece that I wanted to talk about, which is, what you're talking about, like just the clarity about the connection between how you're doing your work and the impact it has on the communities that are touched by that work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if you could speak to the connection between your understanding and your commitment to living out your radical purpose, practicing me first and putting yourself first, and then actually making the contributions that you want to make to yourself, your loved ones, your community, the world. What are some of the connections you've seen between like these three things?
Well, the one thing that I wanted to share about, I'm not sure it directly answers your question, but I think it does tie a lot of this together, is that one of the things that Turtle Tank allowed me to do, and this process of developing these aptitudes of assessing scale, timing, capacity, and support, was to make a decision to really put down, to some extent, a whole set of activities that I was kind of really pushing, and really focus on the Narrowbridge Candles business, and focus on what I have, become clear about what do I want, what do I need, and what do I have, and focusing on the Narrowbridge Candles business. The reason that I focused there is because it was already a much more established business, which to me means I'd already done years of work of developing infrastructure. So I had a website, I had to some extent a customer base and an email list. I have products that I knew how to make and knew how I wanted to present them, and to some extent knew what they cost and what box to put them in, and just a million things that you have to learn to have a business. And I focused there, and it was also the place that I was having revenue. And I was able to assess, I'm not in a place actually financially to develop a bunch of new stuff because I don't yet have the revenue that I need to live off of.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did, what I was able to do really through getting started with more of a me first framework and practicing that was, I had all of this conflict about all of this difficulty, this inability to set down this other stuff because I had this longing and this desire to do it. And because I didn't trust myself, I had so many years in of like not doing the things that I love that I didn't trust myself that I could set it down and not and pick it back up when it was the right time and in the right way. Mm-hmm. And so the practicing centering my own well-being, health and well-being, and developing the skills and the clarity around scale and capacity and timing and pacing allowed me to make a decision that I can actually put this down, and that's not the same as giving up on it. It's not the same as abandoning it or abandoning myself, but I can put it down and focus somewhere else. And what I've seen happen that I was excited to share, which I think does speak to this desire piece as well, is that what I've seen happen is that the herbalism has come in, but it's come in to the container in a way that's actually focused and clear. So the example is that in the Narrow Bridge Candles business, I have ritual boxes and subscriptions, and it's an offering that I'm most excited about, partly because it's most sustainable for me, and partly because it's something that people are so excited to receive. And it takes away a lot of the effort that's required each time to say, I really want to invest in my spiritual and ritual life, but can I really afford it? Is it really important? Does it, it's more like allowing people to make a decision once that that's something they're going to value and do and continue doing it. And they don't have to do it every season or do it every year. It just keeps itself going. So it's something that has its own momentum, which is, I think, has value. Mm-hmm. And then inside of that context, I've just gotten this incredible excitement and inspiration to make formulas that are seasonal specific, or a formula that's specifically supportive to this ritual.
I love it.
Specific ritual and ritual potential that I'm guiding someone through. And all of a sudden, I know exactly what I want to formulate and what its purpose is and how to describe it and the images that I want to represent. And, all of a sudden I'm harvesting herbs from my garden and dipping them in beeswax and sewing them together and sending them to people. It's like, where did all this come from? Well, put it aside. You focused in a place that made sense, and you made space for it to come in with the timing and the pacing where there was actually space.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. And it's one of those things too, like you were talking about how we can't really feel that connection to our intuition or our ancestors or our resources, like when we're in that like striving, pushing place. But we also can't access like these really innovative solutions that you were probably at the beginning trying to figure out, like, wait, how am I going to make this all work and bring in my, and in that space of just like letting go, like you said, you created the space for the solution to just come and present itself. Mm-hmm. So I really love that story and that example.
Yeah. It's a beautiful example of what like strategic being, and I know we're gonna switch into talking about radical purpose in a second. I'm pretty sure, because this is kind of an alignment with that. But in Jonah, and you spoke a little bit about the energy drains, and this is one of the future offerings that we're going to give it. The incoming future turtles. But the idea that I think. We think that strategy is something that we need to mentally figure out, and it's something that, only requires this like intellectual figuring out, when in reality, it's much, much deeper than that. It's this kind of, emerging innovation that we can't even imagine yet, and instead of kind of trying to figure it out in this kind of rational mental way. If, like you said, if we create the space, so that's the difference between power and control. And we've been talking about power and control. So when you're trying to control the environment, you're going to get a really contracted version of what it is. And in fact, control takes so much space and requires so much work, to keep this, country controlled. So many systems in place that overwork and overstretch, right? But when we root in power and we clear space, the solutions just kind of emerge naturally, right? And so, and they emerge in harmonious ways and in balanced ways and in centered ways, so, and ways that you couldn't even have imagined from the state of lack and depletion and overstretch, right? And so there's something about this whole power and control here, and maybe we can kind of segue into this radical purpose piece, EJ. But that's the and then just really touching back on this, how we work, loving the practice of our work, not just the outcome. And this is a common issue that I see with radical entrepreneurs, with activists, with artists. Oftentimes I get people that are more in love with the outcome of their work than the work itself. They're like, well, I want blah blah blah, and blah 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 is often an outcome, But when you ground back into the actual practice, like you said, the folding of the paper and the making of the herbs, and if you're not in love with that, then you're not in love, and you're not in desire. That doesn't mean you're not challenged by it and there isn't challenge. But if that aspect of the work you're not in love with that, then the outcome is going to suffer, And as there's no difference. We always talk about this. There's no difference between the means and the ends in that sense. The outcome is just a snapshot of a milestone you've hit in the process. And if you're in love with the process through and through, of course, you're going to hate it sometimes if you love it, that's part of the work, But my worst fear is apathy with the process, and not having any, and it's just struggle and apathy and that, But when you have this relationship with it, and it's again this power relationship rather than like a relationship of control, you're going to be in your most creative self, and everything, and it's an abundant self, right? Where all these things just come back in, So I love this kind of, that's what you keep touching on, It's like, the more I relax and the more I'm in my body and the more I'm present, the more brilliant, the ideas are, and kind of organic, and they come when they come, and the timing, and there's something about the natural rhythm of creation. We talk about this with Turtle Tank. There's a natural rhythm, and if we're not anchored in our radical purpose, which we're about to talk about, and in ourselves and present with that, then we're not gonna be operating from that place, and we're gonna have to control things, and that's exhausting, right? And so, yeah, EJ, I don't know. And that's probably going to lead into your next question. So,
yeah, I do. I am curious about the radical purpose piece too. And if you could speak to that, Jonah, of just your experience of being able to name and identify and like work with and commit to your radical purpose, and how that shifted how you relate to your work and are living your life.
Yeah. That's a little bit, it's a little bit newer.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest impact of that is beginning to be comfortable with making an impact and really becoming aware of how I thought I wanted to make an impact, but how really kind of terrified I've been of making an impact.
Mm.
And I think I've seen it shift me. I think I've oriented to the candle making as historically as sort of, I know I'm doing something skillfully, increasingly skillfully. I know I'm doing something that people want and value. But I don't really know much about why I'm doing it or how. And I think the being comfortable making an impact, being clear about the why is really supportive in, let's see. So specific examples are, I have a newsletter that I send out only very occasionally that in the most part in the past has been, I've felt like basically difficulty around even sending it, feeling like anytime I'm sending an email out to my listserv, I'm bothering people, I'm annoying them. I'm trying to like sell this thing that maybe people want or they don't want, but they sure can't remember to order it. So how much could they really want it? Just this feeling that, really this conflict between sort of anti-capitalist ideology and this difficulty of trying to like sell something and kind of herd cats to get somebody to do something in relationship to a deadline, and have really started through identifying this radical purpose and becoming more comfortable with making an impact, started to really understand that there's significant people that are, for example, hearing about BDS for the first time, so boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel for the first time through interacting with the product that I'm selling.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I had conversations with people this summer in a ritual space who had like literally never heard of BDS. Jewish people who live in the Bay Area, which is the place in the United States where there is some of the highest level of activity and organization around movements, Palestine and racial justice in general, literally never heard of BDS, which is a huge international movement that's been going since 2005. I was mentioned to somebody that I was making ritual candles not made in Israel, whose response was, never thought of it, never thought about it. Like, actually just never occurred to me. Not even defensive, like, oh, how dare you, but just like, never thought of it. And so that's a political impact to take responsibility for. And then also coming to understand there's people, when I write a newsletter that's not just about order by this date, but I actually take the time and have the confidence to share some critical thinking and analysis that really is at the intersection in a lot of ways of political movements, which I have been very involved in some ways. I'm more marginally involved in this moment. And spiritual practice and ritual and ancestors, and having in some ways the privilege and in some ways the necessity and in some ways just the burden, but living in a space that's pretty connected with land and weather and animals and with myself and my ancestors. I actually have something to say that people are interested in hearing. And really becoming comfortable with that and really being willing to do that, even though it feels like a lot of work. And it also feels really scary. If I write something that I'm sending out to 1,500 people, that's going to take me days to write it, even if it's only 3 paragraphs. And part of that is because I am precise and I'm articulating things that are complex. And part of that is because it's new. And part of that is because I'm absolutely, completely terrified of making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And getting comfortable with that impact is also about being comfortable with making mistakes. And that's, as a person, as a white person who is significantly impacted by perfectionism and white supremacy in a variety of ways, like making mistakes is like pretty big deal, So that's sort of what I can think of off the top of my head related to shifts related to being more clear about purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the other thing is just ability. It's similar to the skills I was talking about previously, ability to sort of assess, is this, oh, I want to do this thing and that thing. I want to do 100 things I don't really want to do, like that seem like a good idea that someone should do, but then I can sort of look at, is this a part of, does this fit into other things I'm doing? Is this something my body can do? Is this something that I would actually enjoy? Like maybe not, but just, I have a tool to sort of open up and look at and eventually become more integrated and more conscious. I think it will become more and more kind of clear and conscious and integrated as time goes on. But, I want to do this thing. Does this fit into what I articulated as my purpose and what I articulated as the different roles I want to play in the world, and what I articulated as what my business is actually doing in the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years. And that doesn't mean that things can't change, but it means that I've already done a lot of work that I get to actually hold on to and then use as a measuring stick of all the other things that come in. Because there's a million things. There's a million projects that need to happen,
Yeah. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So the three things that stuck with me: clarity, consciousness, and integration. Clear, conscious, integrated, you said, right? Mm-hmm. I just wanted to kind of bring those words out. So, and the impact, because I know you kept saying impact, and I wanted to be like, Jonah, remember the conversation we had about leadership, which is what this is really about, walking into like a position of what is leadership, right? And especially in the context sometimes where the word leadership can sound like a pompous, self-absorbed, self-appointed, like lead, I'm a leader, but the truth is that's what we're talking about when you walk into a position of impact, right? So the first thing is, I want to talk about integration for a second. So when you do your radical purpose, you become more integrated in terms of what you're doing. And it's not that you're focusing at the expense of things. It's that everything that you do includes all of who you are.
Right.
And so automatically you're going to draw, things to you that are everything that you are. That's number one, and that creates efficiency. Right. And then the second thing is, so clarity. I love that, where you're like, what to say no to. And the truth is, as marginalized folks, as people of color, for us as well, as queer folks, whatever, disabled folks, etc., we're used to having to do everything because so much is missing, right? So we're like, oh my God, there's 15 holes we have to plug. Oh, I only have 10 fingers, and where are the next 5? And I can't take my hands off, because if I take my hands off, no one's going to take this and everyone's going to die. And that's kind of like how we live our lives, right? And when we, and I call this the exercise of taking your fingers off the holes, you're like, boop, 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 you're plugging, taking it out so that you can create. Essentially what happens is when you step into your lane, which is where that clarity thing comes in, and we really own and become fully present with the lane that we're in, or the lanes, or the integrated places that we're in, then we can allow for other people to walk into those lanes that are maybe theirs, and create much more impact and much more efficiency. So that thing around impact is so connected to this thing around, unplugging from these places that aren't ours. We want all these things. And so what's the difference again between process and outcome? We want all these outcomes, but are we responsible for every single one of them? And when we start to stretch ourselves that way, we limit impact, we limit power and potential, we limit our gifts that we're here to bring, and we limit the impact of those gifts. So that's another thing. And then the consciousness around that, which is what you talked about. And so again, you're creating efficiency and impact, and greater desire and greater gift and greater, leadership, and the one thing I wanted to say about the radical purpose and the why is it's always bigger than a product, because a product exists within a system, you know, and a community. So your dream and your vision and your why is massive, right? And so your product is serving to move that why forward. It's not, so you're no longer, I remember you and I having this conversation, like, Jonah, you don't sell candles, you know, you're trying to work for freedom, you know, you're working for freedom. Like, what does that mean? You know, so oftentimes we get lost in the what, you know, and we forget. And that's part of what the radical purpose does, is it realigns us with, okay, wait, what are we really doing here? Why are we doing this? How are we doing this? And what are we doing? And those are three different things. Right? We end up talking about that in the radical purpose. And even that division between those things is what starts to create the consciousness around, like, I'm not selling candles, you know, I'm a ritualist. I'm recreating the way things are thought about and felt and seen. You know, I'm making a political statement. I'm, you know, and I am in the, you know, practicing BDS, you know, I'm doing, like, you know, so it stops being candles and it starts being world-changing offering and gift, right? And that's what you're really doing. And you know, understanding the impact of that then starts to put you in a position of responsibility also that's different. Like, so the consciousness around the responsibility of the leadership position that you are inherently in at this point, you know, and you have to hold a certain kind of way, whether you like it or not right now, right? And so it's like, the question isn't, you know, I don't want to be a leader, or should I be a leader? The question is, you are a leader by virtue of doing the work that you're doing. So now how are you going to do that? Right. You know, and how are you going to own the fact that you're not just selling candles? Because if you were just selling candles, then we'd be in capitalist production space, you know, but we're not just selling candles. We're creating communities, we're changing lives, and, you know, we're creating worlds of radical love and freedom. I say that, you know, but that's the truth. You know, and so when we stepped out of this candle thing and back into, like, who are you, Jonah? You know, what have you done? And integrating everything that you've done in the past, you know, your organizing background, your ritual background, your herbalist background, you know, all into Narrow Bridge Candles. That's what also kind of expanded everything out and was just like, okay, whoa, you know, you're already in a position of impact. You're like, but I want to do political. Wait, I'm already doing political work, right? But I want to do it. Wait, I'm already doing herbalism. Right. And so all of a sudden it's all integrated. It's all like one and the same thing. But we're so used to being subdivided and compartmentalized. That's also part of capitalism. Oh, you can be queer here. You can be, you know, brown here. You can be disabled there. Whatever, you know. And then wait a minute, you know, and then you produce here and do activism here, work at a bank, and, you know, blah, blah. No, you know, how do we integrate our lives for greater efficiency, greater impact, and desire? You know, and in desire and purpose are the two organizing factors that do that for us, I think. You know, so I'm gonna end on that note, but that's that. I just love, you know, how you bring those things together, Jonah, and just articulate them so clearly. So thank you. You know, anyway, EJ, I don't know, I think that took over a little bit, but I love that. That's part of my work. I love that part of my work. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that. And Jonah said a lot of gems in there, and I appreciate you teasing them out and, like, naming them for us.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up, I'm sure everyone is curious about the work that you described, about, you know, where they can find out about your candle and your subscription program. So yeah, Jonah, where can people find out more about Narrow Bridge Candles and your herbalism work?
Yeah. narrowbridgecandles.org is the website, and I'm on Facebook as Narrow Bridge Candles and on Instagram at Narrow Bridge Candles. So it's pretty consistent, should be relatively easy to find. And the website is a pretty great place to read more about me. There's also a bunch of different, you know, a drop down with all kinds of different things. If you're looking for ritual kits, there's a page. If you're looking for Jewish ritual candles specifically, there's a page. And then there's also a section for multi-use ritual candles and subscriptions. And then also increasingly a curated space that's where I am selling other ritual objects made by others whose values and politics I'm aligned with and who I'm excited to just share and boost. So also, if people are interested in being connected in that way, they should be in touch with me. And yeah, very increasingly excited to be on social media and really experiencing it as a way to actually be connected with people. Not just a way to sort of tell people about what I'm doing, but actually get feedback about my impact and about what I'm making and doing, and have, as a source of connection and creativity. So
that's great. I love that.
And so people can also come and visit the Narrow Bridge Candles Chandlery here. I have herbal medicine gardens, and I have a candle making space that smells incredible. Just the smell of beeswax is immune modulating. It's pretty just fun, cool place to be. Most people have never been in like a candle making space, so come visit.
Yes. It's an art, you're an artist, that's what I wanted to, another thing I wanted to say is remembering, like, this is, we've had the pleasure of having some of Jonah's art as well in our, so it's really magical. So thank you so much, Jonah, for the love work that you do, because it really is love work, and it is an art that, when you and I talk about this, but how many people are still making candles like this in the way that you are, and that's important to, it's important to point that out, saying, this is a really sacred, in rare operation, so remembering that.
Yeah, and I don't have a specific ancestor or specific location that I know that I'm inheriting this from, but it's pretty clear it's not like random, I'm doing this on behalf of someone or many someones.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're magic. Thank you, Jonah, so much.
Thank you. What an honor.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Jonah, you just said so much, and I love how specific your stories and examples were. And I just want to invite people who are watching us now live, people who are watching the replay, like, please leave a comment in there and let us know, like, what's a gem, what's something that you took away from something that Jonah shared. Also, if you have any questions that you want to ask, or, connect with Jonah, you can find them on Facebook in the comment section, tag them. And definitely visit their website. There's a link up on the screen. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jonah, for sharing all that you did. And we'll be back with our next Be First story this Thursday with someone that you've mentioned was actually, that you work with a lot, was your accountability buddy. We're going to be talking to Imkali Hashiki on Thursday at 1 p.m., 2 p.m. We'll get the time right. All right. So take care, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Jonah.